Alarm fatigue from continuous glucose monitors is very real. When alerts just keep going off and you just are over it. And having access to glucose information on your phone and your watch can wind up causing a lot of anxiety and exhaustion. Today's episode is all about how me and my guest have handled it. Welcome to the show. I'm Justin. I have type 1 diabetes, and on here I talk all things diabetes tech, news, and management, and share stories with educators, tech leaders, and those thriving with diabetes. I spoke with Ginger Vieira. She also has type 1 diabetes, and she's come on the show before to talk about inhaled insulin, Afrezza. You should check out that episode. It's actually what sparked today's idea. So Ginger is an author, journalist, and YouTuber covering a bunch of topics like exercise, food, and treatment. She has written a slew of books, including her most recent, How to Stop Overeating During Low Blood Sugars with Diabetes. I've linked her latest book and YouTube channel in the show notes. Today, Ginger tells us all about her long break from CGM alerts and her return back to CGM alerts with the Libre 3 and how she's prevented alert fatigue. Then I get into my own experience with alert fatigue, my new smartwatch, and how I manage alerts with a bunch of customization settings on the Dexcom G7. Keep in mind that anything you hear on this podcast or on any of my pages is not medical advice. Always consult with a physician before making changes to your healthcare. Today's episode is sponsored by T1D Exchange. You can directly make an impact on diabetes healthcare, treatments, and technology by participating in the T1D Exchange registry. It starts with a simple survey about your life with T1D, and it only takes about 15 minutes. After that, you'll have a personal portal with ongoing T1D study and survey opportunities. Plus, some of these studies even offer compensation. Signing up with the link in the show notes helps support my channel, and it allows me to continue putting out free content. You can sign up at t1dexchange.org/diabetic or click that link in today's show notes. Ginger, welcome back to the show. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Justin.
Of course. So last time you were on the show, we talked all about Afrezza and your experience using that inhalable insulin, which was an awesome episode. If you haven't heard it, go check it out. I learned so much about how that insulin works. And one thing that came up in that conversation was CGM alert fatigue. Mm-hmm. And so we thought that it would be a natural conversation to kind of come out of that. And also, you've been on a little bit of a journey recently with that. Can you kind of bring us all up to speed with what's going on right now in your diabetic journey?
My CGM history. Should I do that?
Yeah, let's start with that. Tell us about your experience with those.
I was in my early 20s. I was in a study for a hot second. That was like the early CGM days. They were trying, it was one of the ones that, I don't know if it was Medtronic or Dexcom, because I never actually ended up getting, I think I had a CGM in for a week, but it was like, they go in with the super big needles and they were really complicated to establish. And
when was this? Roughly?
So I'm 38. This was probably when I was like 22, 23. So
that was
CGM
2000-ish.
did not exist yet. Yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't like being in the study because they were telling me how much insulin to take. And I was like, I don't want to do this. So I got out of that. And then eventually, though, when Dexcom became, widely accessible, for my first pregnancy, I started using a Dexcom maybe a year before getting pregnant. And because I was planning.
Dexcom was this?
I want to say maybe the G4.
Okay.
And prior to using a Dexcom, my A1C was probably around 6.8. And then once I had pregnancy on the brain, I got that absolutely taught me how to get my A1C down into the fives, high fives, low sixes. And then I continued to use that through the pregnancy and then through my next pregnancy. My kids are 2 years apart. And then I could not stand, it was really halfway through my second pregnancy, I could not stand the sound of a CGM alert. And I couldn't bear it anymore. So I went back to, it was causing me to make rash decisions. It was causing me to panic. And it was just giving me anxiety. And I think that I didn't know till more recently. I didn't know till really after my second child was born, but I've understood this about myself more in recent years. So my youngest child is 7. I think I already have kind of low level anxiety. And I think, many people with type 1 do. And I don't really have anxiety about diabetes, but I think when I get overwhelmed, I have little mini anxiety attacks. And I didn't know in my youth that that's what I was having. And CGMs, the data and the arrows were triggering those attacks for me. And also just another thing, like after my second child was born, she slept 20 hours a day for the first 7 months. We thought there was something wrong with her. She just slept nonstop. And then when she woke up, it was like her battery was supercharged. She started running. And I had a 2.5-year-old and a very high energy 7-month-old. And then this CGM beeping at me. And, because I tried to go back on my CGM after she was born. Mm-hmm. And I got so overwhelmed. And the main thing I could do was turn off that CGM by not using it anymore. And, so I went back to pricking my finger for probably like 5 years. I already know that I learned so much from CGMs that I have been able to manage for the next 5 years after that, the same A1C. In the high 5s, low 6s, without that, just by pricking my finger a bajillion times a day.
What CGM were you using during during the second pregnancy or after that? Was that the G5, the G6?
Yeah, I think the G5 probably came out during my second pregnancy. And then after a few years, my doctor, my primary care, who doesn't usually recommend anything, he said, the Libre 14-day doesn't alert. You just scan it. So we could relieve my poor fingers. We're covered in a million spots because I was pricking my finger 10, 15 times a day sometimes, right? And I was getting test strips. The only way you can do that is you have unlimited test strips. And I'm going to say that Diathrive saved me there. I could get as many test strips as I needed because Diathrive doesn't include an insurance company. So I had buckets of test strips, which was really gave me a lot of peace of mind, right? That I didn't have to fight insurance to get all that blood sugar data with finger pricks. So then I used the 14-day from Libre for the last, I don't know exactly when I started it, but the last 3 or 4 years maybe. And then 2 weeks ago, I started using the Libre 3.
Okay, yeah, we're going to have to get into why it felt like the right time.
Actually, I was forced into it by my iPhone. But I'll let you bring that up when you want.
Have you ever used an insulin pump? And have you ever used an insulin pump tied to a CGM for automated insulin?
You'll notice a trend in this conversation that I really don't like technology. I really appreciate it, but I also don't like it.
This is the anti-tech episode.
Yeah. Yes, but you can't,
the
tech it's kind of, right? Like I'm teched out, but I used an insulin pump for the first, let's say 7 years of my life with type 1. I was the first teenager at Dartmouth Hitchcock Hospital that they let go on an insulin pump because I was responsible and diligent about my injections. So they're like, all right, let's use her as our guinea pig, see if kids can actually handle this. And I just, in college, right before college, had a really bad DKA episode. It wasn't the pump's fault. I'd been stringing Christmas lights outside in freezing weather for the movie theater I worked at. And the Vermont, New Hampshire winter killed my insulin. And I didn't know. And I woke up in DKA the next morning. And I did go back on my pump after that, but I just hated having it in my skin, and I hated not feeling like I could trust it. And it wasn't the pump's fault, but that wouldn't have happened if I was on injections because I would have had long-acting insulin in my system.
Have you used a pump tied to a CGM since then?
So then during my first pregnancy or right before, I did try going on Omnipod, and I had like 2 site issues within the first month where, your blood sugar goes high because you're not getting the insulin. And I was like, that's it. I'm not doing this. So that was my last pump experience. I have really sensitive skin.
But never
I hate
automated.
I won't go on an automated insulin pump, at least not what we have today. It's too much tech. It's too much stuff. I don't trust that system, and I intensely want to micromanage the hell out of it myself. And yeah.
So you're on MDI and Afrezza.
Right. I take 1 injection of long-acting a day. I take a few teeny injections of Novolog, or I might take a larger injection of Novolog if I'm eating something like pizza, or I'm just at a restaurant. I'll start with Afrezza, and then I'll take some Novolog to cover the longer digestion.
Okay, got it.
But I use Afrezza for as much of my meals and corrections as possible.
Okay. Now, before we get to Libre 3, which you were forced to get on by your iPhone, what was it like? What was that experience like using the original Libre, the 14-day sensor that you had to scan to get readings?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with having to scan to get readings, especially also if you're on Afrezza, because Afrezza leaves your system so fast that your blood sugar will start to rise an hour after eating, and that's when you do the follow-up dose. But if I get really distracted, I miss the rise, and so I'd be like, oh, crap, I forgot to take my follow-up dose. And I really appreciate that flexibility of Afrezza, but I would have to remember to go scan. So I was scanning. I was avoiding the anxiety of alarms, but I had a different type of anxiety. I had the don't miss the fluctuations anxiety, because you got to go manually scan to catch them.
Question, when you scan, are you getting just the reading in that moment, or does it upload the last bunch of readings?
Well, it does paint a graph. So,
Yeah.
It would, if I scan first thing in the morning and I didn't scan all night, it does paint an idea of where your blood sugars were at. Sometimes I was like, I don't think that's possible. It would say I went way up to 300 and came down. I just know that didn't happen based on what, what I ate and what insulin I took. But mostly it didn't do that. Mostly it painted an accurate picture. It's more bumpy too, because it's not this continuous thing. So when I posted on social, it would look like I'm just.
Well, so at least with the Dexcom G7, they removed what was called the smoothing feature that the G6 had. So the G7 graphs will sometimes be very spotty at times. So it could have been similar to that. And the G7s and G6s will kind of, if they disconnect for a certain period of time and they reconnect, they'll have stored that information.
Yeah.
And it's re-uploaded, so you don't lose that information.
Right. Yeah. But so I was scanning my arm 15, 20 times a day, possibly. And there's certain times a day where I know my blood sugar starts to rise, because I practice intermittent fasting at 8 to 9 a.m. window. Some days, most days, I start to rise. So I can go from 100 to 200. And that's when I know I need a little bolus, because my liver is saying, you haven't eaten breakfast, here's some sugar. So I would be waiting to see the evidence of that by scanning. Now I don't have to do that. I have, in the last 2 weeks, I can tell you I am looking at my blood sugar so much less, because I know it's going to tell me if I'm going high. I know it's going to tell me if I'm going low. So in that regard, it has totally calmed down that mental work.
Interesting. So I think it sounds like the Libre 3 and the instant access to readings has affected you in a way, in the opposite of how you thought it would.
Yes. As a stubborn old lady finally gave in and updated her tech, and I should have probably done it a little while ago.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
Yeah. I definitely needed a break from the alarms, but I think the break is over, and I'm grateful to have the alarms. I will tell you, I'm grateful for the sound options in the Libre 3. There's 2 sound options. I don't know why they can't add in more. There's 700 sound options for my text messages. Why are there only 2 for a CGM? But whatever. Yeah. But one of the sounds is terrible, and one is really nice.
Dexcom does offer a lot of different sounds
Okay.
for alerts, and later I want to get into the way we're navigating all of that, and it will also be interesting to hear about your experience and a fresh idea of what Libre looks like. I've used Libre 3, but it's been a minute, so kind of going back and forth on Dexcom and Libre will be cool. But before we get into that, what would you say are the aspects of alerts that you realize now that you missed?
Definitely overnight, right? So again, I practice intermittent fasting, which I eat most of my calories between 2 and, well, I start eating around 2-ish, but I eat most of my calories between like 6 and 10 p.m. So I am really good at anticipating how to dose insulin for that. And Afrezza is awesome for that too, because Afrezza reduces how much rapid acting insulin I have on board overnight, because Afrezza clears your system so quickly. So any Afrezza I took for the meals I ate before bed is well out of my system by midnight. And then I just have to think about long acting and maybe a little bit of Novolog. But I would still have nights where I'm eating something that I'm not used to eating, right? Like, I mean, all the time. I don't follow some really rigid diet. And so I could easily miss opportunities in the middle of the night to prevent lows or treat lows and treat highs, correct highs. So I definitely anticipate better blood sugars overnight.
Is there anything you miss before the Libre 3, before having these alerts?
That I missed about?
Yeah, and there doesn't have to be. It sounds like you're pretty happy.
It's that security system of just knowing when I think that CGMs actually kind of desensitize you to the symptoms of a low. And when I went off using a CGM that could alert me, I'm more hyper aware of all the variables and all the symptoms, right? I mean, I was just as on it. And so I think the alerts let you step back a little bit. And I'm also in a better space now mentally where I know don't freak out because there's an up arrow. Also, I have inhaled insulin. So I know I can watch that up arrow for a little bit and see how high I'm really going based on the variables that I know could be affecting my blood sugar. And I'm like, all right, if it hits 170, I'll take a correction. This morning, I was on my dog walk. I'm usually really steady at that time of day, walking my kids to school. It's about a mile to school, and then I extend it on the way home. Could be 2.5 mile walk. My blood sugar started rising halfway through the walk, and I didn't have any insulin on me. I just had my phone and my little dog walking purse, poop bags and candy. That's it. And if I was home, I would have seen my blood sugar rising over that 160, thinking it's that early morning potential, whatever. My 8 to 9 spike is happening a little earlier. That's annoying. I don't know why, but it is. And I would have taken insulin to correct it. Because I couldn't, by the time I got home, it was down to 130. And that's just not how my morning blood sugars usually go. So it was very strange for me to be rising. I usually am at 100 and I stay there until 8 a.m. I start to rise, So it was a good thing I couldn't react to the arrows. That's a challenge we're all going to face with CGMs is what's this arrow really going to do?
Yeah. And I think the way you're managing your diabetes versus the way I am with it, I have an automated system, and you're on MDI. It's a bit different. It's different thinking and different reacting, right? Like at this point, I'm relying so much on a system to take that information, and I don't have to make these decisions. I try my best to not look at what the system's doing, and just to be like, it's going to do its job. I will log my carbs when I need to, make sure I bolus, ahead of time. And for me, it's taken time, but I've been able to let go more and more over a period of time to a point where I trust it. And I don't think often about my CGM levels, which has been really nice. And for you, while you're managing it differently and you're able to look at these numbers and alter them if you need to with your Afrezza or corrections, you're also, in a way, you're relying on your CGM alerts to kind of do the same thing. You have maybe some more actions, possibly, but it's just interesting. I was just working that out in my head.
I think too, when you've gone through 2 pregnancies really close together, or even 1, it's very hard to break out of that intense management mindset. And you're used to trying to get this really what's impossible on a normal part of your life. But when you're pregnant, you make this a part-time job, right? But that's not something you could do. I'll speak for myself. I can't manage those pregnancy. My A1C is the same during pregnancy as it technically is now, but it's just this tighter time and range success, right? And you just don't ever want to go over 140, let alone 160. And so today I've been able to wash off that pregnancy mindset, which honestly can take a couple years because you start seeing bigger fluctuations, which are really normal for real life with type 1, but you feel terrible about it because you were so used to that pregnancy mindset. And now I just have I'm a kinder mindset of like, hey, it's okay if you can't correct this 170 until you get home. Like, it's all right. Your graph is not going to look as nice as you hoped, and it's okay.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It is a much tighter range. I would love my time in my range to be what a pregnancy range is, but that probably wouldn't be great for my mental health right now. But the goal is for algorithms to get to a point where they can keep us in that tighter range.
Right.
And I actually got into that a little bit in my recent video on the journey to an artificial pancreas, which if you haven't watched, go watch.
It's so good. You should watch it.
Thank you.
But yeah, your pregnancy range is like you set your low alarm, your high alarm at 140. And, and everybody's a little different. If that's too tight for some people, they might have it higher. But if you have the knowledge to do that, that's really the goal. And I would never set my high alarm at 140 today. I'd be like, no, I'm
talk about alarm fatigue.
Right. And I think that's really what triggered alarm fatigue for me, for sure.
Yeah. Let's get into Libre 3. So first of all, you were forced to get onto this. What happened?
Well, I told you this would come up again. My tech resistance, I hate changing phones, and I don't want a cell phone that's the size of my face. So I had the SE. So I guess it was a 13. But it was small. It was even smaller than this. Now I have the 15 non-pro, and
it's big. It's big.
Yeah, this is, even though it's not the pro one, it is still too big for my little hand. I cannot reach the top app. I have to hold it with both hands to get that app in the corner, I already have joint problems, and that makes me mad. So anyway, I was really clinging to my SE, and there was an update, iOS update, 3 weeks ago. And after that update, within a couple days, my Libre app just stopped working. And it would not work. I could get my husband's phone, which I think is a 15, to talk to my Libre 14 day. I do have a theory that's unfounded, unconfirmed, that Libre wants to get everybody off the 14 day, right? Because it's just old school and it's not continuous. It's like, well, why would anyone choose this over the Libre 3? And it would save them money to not be producing multiple types of CGMs. So I think they're also not letting these new things support.
Oh, yeah. Libre. I mean, they just don't update it.
Right. They're letting it die out. So that's why I was forced. And so I went without a CGM. I'd use my husband's phone, but he also needs his phone, so that was tedious. I still had 1 million test strips left over from Diathrive, even though I hardly test. They still saved the day. And I had to go get a new phone, and then I had to get a new prescription. And this was like all happening on a Friday. So I was like begging my doctor's office, like, I know it takes you guys 3 days to look at your messages, but please, can you prioritize this today? And yeah, it was a stressful weekend.
People always ask me, Justin, how do you keep on your diabetes technology? And it's a simple answer. Skin Grip. And that is why I partnered with them to sponsor today's episode. I use Skin Grip's adhesive patches to keep my Dexcom and Omnipod extra secure, especially during the humid summer, swimming, cardio workouts, and they are a must pack on all of my vacations. Whenever I notice my tech beginning to peel off, I throw on a Skin Grip and I'm set. And I look good doing it because they come in a bunch of different colors, and for a more subtle look, they come in skin tone and clear options. I prefer the colors though because I match them with my outfits. Skin Grip has patches for all CGMs, tubeless pumps, and infusion sets. They're latex-free, hypoallergenic, and easy to apply. As a Diabetic listener, you'll get 10% off your order. To grab some for yourself, check out that link in today's show notes or go to skingrip.com and use code JUSTIN10. Now, back to the show. Is the Libre 3 easily accessible for people to show people who are watching? Or is it like,
yes.
I would love for people to, this thing is so small. It is the size of 2 stacked pennies, whereas Dexcom G7 is the size of like 2 stacked quarters. Oh, okay. You don't have to take off the patch if you don't want to.
Take it off, but
it is so small. You know what? I'll be right back. 1 second. Let me, I have one. So this is the Dexcom. I'll start with the Dexcom G6 because people are still on it. Dexcom G6. Then this is the Dexcom G7.
Yep.
And then this is the Libre 3.
It's teeny.
Like,
it is so cute. When I first put it on, I was like, oh my gosh, that thing's so cute. Even the applicator is adorable compared to the 14-day applicator.
It's so small. Yeah.
Yeah.
The applicator's you can fit a lot more in your luggage more easily.
Yeah.
So it's small and it's
half the size. Yes.
It's small. There's a little less adhesive around it, and yeah, and it lasts 14 days.
Yeah. The applicator is one step. Not that the 14-day was hard, but the 14-day you had to take 2 pieces, put them together.
Yeah. I will say, from my experience wearing G7 versus Libre 3. The G7 stays on much better on my skin. The G7 will stay on its full 10 and a half days, at least during not the summer. The summer is when things get a little wonky for me because of humidity and heat and sweating and swimming. But the Libre 3, it started coming off a little sooner. I don't have a ton of experience though, so I've only worn it for a month total. So
I can't speak to its adhesive because I always put an overpatch on my CGMs, not because they fall off, but because I rip them off when I'm getting dressed or just walking through a doorway. I'm apparently a buffalo. Yeah. So I've ripped them off on kitchen cupboards. I don't know why. I just must not walk very well. So that's why I do that. Just sense of peace that it won't come off.
Have you tried the Dexcom G6 or G7?
I think the last Dexcom I used was the G5. And the reason I don't continue to choose that one, what I really appreciate about, I've been without health insurance, not right now, I have health insurance, but I have been without health insurance for many years at one point in my 20s. So I learned how to be really thrifty, which is part of why I'm good at MDI, right? I didn't have a choice because you cannot afford an insulin pump without health insurance. And patient assistance programs back then were terrible. They were not like today. The Insulin for All didn't exist. There wasn't all the advocacy that exists today. So the Libre 3 or any Libre product you can get from your pharmacy. It's just one prescription. You don't have to fight with DME suppliers and DME insurance coverage. If you don't have health insurance for any Libre CGM, you can go and get a savings coupon. I did have to do this a few years ago for a period of time. A savings coupon that brings the price down to $35 per sensor. So it would be,
$70 a month.
A month, which is doable. With insurance, it cost me the same exact thing. So,
wow.
Yeah. So
it's
so much more affordable than Dexcom.
Interesting. It would be cool to do like a breakdown of costs with and without insurance. There's so many different types of insurance.
Yeah.
So it changes the price. It is a very confusing
Right.
system.
Yeah. There's no one size
Purposely,
fits all. Yeah.
it's meant to be very confusing. So you just say, okay.
Yeah. Right.
So what have you kind of touched on this, but tell me a little bit more about the alerts on Libre 3. How have you been navigating them? And I guess in order to kind of prevent that fatigue from coming back, what do you like about them? Tell us everything.
The Libre 3 gives you 4 things that are going to beep at you. The urgent low glucose alarm, which you cannot change the sound of. You can only have the really obnoxious sound, and that's when you go below 55. You can turn it. Can you turn it off? No. You cannot change anything about it. It even says this
The urgent low. Yeah.
Urgent low. And that's good. I don't want to die. So I appreciate this urgent low, but I hate the sound of it. Then there's the low glucose alarm. Right now I have it set at 60, which I should have updated that. But I don't mind waking up at like 65 because as soon as I wake up, my blood sugar rises like 20 or 30 points. It would be more if I wasn't taking metformin. So then these other ones have 2 sounds, custom and standard.
Yeah, that's crazy that there's so few. I mean, Dexcom has like 30 or 20,
Let's
20
see
different.
if the sound will come through. Here's custom.
Yeah, it came through.
Yeah. Okay. And then standard is just, it's hard to make it go without going to the other one first. I can't. Do you hear that?
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like a text. Okay.
Yeah. It's so gentle. And then you do have this option, override, do not disturb. So you can set it so that if I put on do not disturb on my phone, it will not alarm me through do not disturb.
So it doesn't override that.
Yeah, it even explains because it's like It's kind of asking a negative. The option is override do not disturb. Turn on if you want this alarm to always play a sound and appear on the lock screen, even if your phone is muted or do not disturb is on. So I'm going to turn it on because I don't want to die.
I have that as well. I keep it so that it can. And if for some reason, if you turn it off accidentally, you can go to do not disturb settings and choose which apps you want or even people you want to be able to kind of come through that wall, which is nice.
Yeah. Yes. And then the high glucose alarm is the same as the low glucose alarm. Same option, same sounds. But the sound is a little different. If it goes up instead of down. Just the tone.
What would you say is different now than before when you had alarms that made you want to not have a CGM that alerts you? Like what's changed with this, or how are you going into it differently?
I think a big part of it is that it's been that much longer since my second pregnancy, and my alarm fatigue was adamant, and I was like, nobody beep at me, please. Like, there's not a really, except for text messages and phone calls and WhatsApp, nothing else on my phone can beep at me. I don't have alerts for any social media app. Nobody can beep at me except like the actual things, right? And so in general, I just really don't like being beeped at.
Yeah. I think that there's also, it's not just, at least for me, something I've had to overcome was not just alert fatigue, but information fatigue. Do you find that you're ever over analyzing where your blood sugar has been and where it's going? I think you said before that you had kind of maybe had that a little bit. How are you kind of overcoming that now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely more, I don't know, the best way to describe it, I'm more kind with myself of like, it's okay. At the same time, my high alarm is set at 160. I don't want to be over 160, but I don't panic.
I want to share some of my techniques with Dexcom G7 that I think could help people who are having any form of fatigue with their alerts. And I've found that these few things have made it a lot better for me, because I absolutely will go through these CGM fatigue moments. And I think that what happens often is like, I feel like I've gotten my blood sugars under pretty great control, but then there are days or even like weeks where it's just a bad week that kind of ruins the last 8 months
Yeah, and
of
you feel
great,
like you don't know
levels,
how to manage this all of a sudden. Yeah, yeah.
No, and it's so easy. I feel like it's easier to be harder on yourself for a short period of time than be proud of yourself for a long period of time sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
So Dexcom G7 has a few options that have made life so much easier. One of them is quiet mode. That anxiety of your alerts going off during a movie or a Broadway show, that has gone away for me with quiet mode. I no longer have an anxiety of my alerts going off, which absolutely was a thing. I was so worried for so long, at least with G6, that my alerts would go off. Now, when I get to a show or a movie, I put quiet mode on for, I think you can put it up to 6 hours. I put it on for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever. And I will not get a sounded alert during that show. I will get an alert sent to my phone, a vibrate, and that's it. If I don't acknowledge an urgent low, then it will alert you, I think, on the next alert 5 minutes later.
Okay.
But I always acknowledge if something like that happens. It has really helped with that anxiety that would come out of just going to these spaces where you'd feel where I felt very uncomfortable if my alarms went off.
Okay.
And another setting that I like is silent mode, which you can turn all of your alerts to silent, including urgent low, which also like scares me a little bit. But the way I use this, at least, is when I have, say, an urgent low, there's nothing worse than when you're treating an urgent low, getting more alerts that you're having an urgent low. It's like, I get it. I know I'm already panicking a little bit.
Yeah.
Physically, I don't need you to keep telling me. So I will put on silent mode in that setting for 20 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That way I give it enough time to kind of bounce back and not get that alert. So that's been great.
Okay.
Another thing that I've done specifically overnight is on Dexcom G7. And let me know if this is possible with Libre 3. On Dexcom G7, you can create different profiles. So I have an overnight profile. Can you do that with Libre 3?
Not that I know of. You can put it on, and I didn't really, so I haven't thought about this as much as you because I just started using it in 2 weeks. I don't have alarm fatigue right now, right? I'm recovered from my postpartum alarm fatigue, but you can, and you can put your phone on vibrate like you normally would, and it will just vibrate all the alarms except for that urgent low. And I have done that at night when I'm annoyed. And so far, there's been one night where my husband actually left the bed because I was only half awake acknowledging the high alarm, and I wasn't really acknowledging it. So it was going off every 5 minutes. But then you turn it to vibrate, or I just turned my whole phone off and on that night and a few after when I just started using it. And then I missed the information.
What I love about the ability to create a second profile for overnight for me is I'm able to set a wider range, a higher target to be alerted. So what I do is I believe typically I'm alerted whenever my sugar levels go over 180, but when I'm sleeping, I believe I've set that to 200 or 210. Okay. That way, if my levels go a little higher than I want them to be, I'm not going to get alerts. And also there is delay first alert. So that I think that's been a fantastic setting. This is just, I put this on and basically if I can set a level for if my levels go over that under a certain amount of time, which I can set. So let's say I have it set to 15 minutes. So if my levels go over 180, but then drop back under it in under 15 minutes, I won't get an alert. And these settings are all, and I commend Dexcom for bringing these in, and I implore Libre Freestyle to bring these in because they have helped me immensely.
Good. Okay.
And I don't suffer from alert fatigue nearly as much. Maybe it's 5% of what I used to feel.
Good. And all these companies had to learn, you know, because they were just so proud of their ability to alert you when these things first came out, that nobody considered the fact that we might want some peace for a minute. Like we might need to just let it hang out at 185 and not get immediately reminded every 2 seconds that it's still over 185, just for quality of life, you know? So that's interesting. I think that they've developed more flexibility there than the Libre 3, because I don't see any of that in here. It feels pretty basic compared to the Dexcom options.
And one last thing that's really helped me out when it comes to the anxieties of where my levels will go is wearing a different watch. I love that I wasn't wearing it. I had to it was on my bed. I had to go grab it. This is the Withings watch, and it looks like a very, I think it's pretty sleek looking, but it looks like your average watch with the hands that, move around the screen. But there is a screen in the middle, a nice like black OLED screen, very clear, that gives you, it tracks health metrics like heart rate, step count, how far you've walked. You can log workouts with it too. But it also receives alerts that are sent that go to your phone. So the phone will send its alerts to your watch, whether it's phone calls, text messages. I have text messages turned off because I don't need those going off. I get alert fatigue from those things too.
I mean, everybody does these days, yeah.
Right. But I think what's really helped me is not having the chart of my glucose levels on my wrist, because I don't think I need them there. It's just cool information, but I don't need to know where my glucose has been the last 3 hours, because I can look at that at the end of the day in my bed and reflect. But I don't need to necessarily have that at all times, or I can open up my phone if I truly need it. But what I do get on this watch are alerts, the life-saving alerts, the high glucose, low glucose, urgent low soon. I get the arrows too. I did a whole Instagram reel on this watch because I truly love it. I will put that in the description, as well as an affiliate link to check these out. They make a bunch of different ones and smaller ones, and there's a range of ones they make. But it's the Scan Watch 2 by Withings. But I love that I get the alerts, but I don't have the overwhelming amount of information right on my wrist.
That's such a good point, because like two nights ago, I learned how to make the amazing strawberry margaritas at home. It's not even that hard. I just finally did it correctly. But so I was having that with these avocado chips from Costco, and I used a combo of a Frezza and Novolog, but my Novolog pen was 10 days expired, and I didn't. And I know a lot of people don't notice expired insulin, but I really notice it. And I think the more sensitive you are to insulin, the more you might notice it. And my blood sugar just went up to 300 and sat there all night. And my phone did alarm me at one point when I went over 160, and I took correction insulin, but it wasn't enough to bring me down. And I was rising so much because I thought I had plenty of Novolog on board. And so this is one thing I would change about all CGMs. I wish I could say, hey, I gave a correction and I'd like to be notified again in 1 hour or 2 hours, depending on what type of insulin you're using. I use a Frezza, so in 1 hour, I should be down under range if I got what I needed. And please alert me again. Instead, I just sat above my alarm, so it didn't continue to alarm me that I was still above target. So I spent the whole night like near 300. And then, I got myself down in the morning, and my graph was beautiful that day, but every time I looked at it, I had to see the 300, and I hated having to see that. And it's like, I tried to do all the things. I felt, like I was very responsible, but my insulin was expired. And so I felt just lousy every time I saw my graph,
Yeah. Like I said, with Dexcom, there is that way to snooze alerts, but that's like a pre-programmed setting. You can't tell it, okay, I got this alert, and kind of choose what snooze you want. I do envision a way, that they could do is if the alert comes up on your phone, holding down on it and tapping something that says, alert me in 1 hour if it doesn't change or something. I could see that being a thing. Also, as I look at my phone, look at this cool little graph I have on my phone. So for people watching, for people listening, I have this live activity. It's gone. This live activity that works with both Dexcom and Libre, by the way. You could do this. So it is a live activity. So if anyone has recently used Lyft or Uber on their phone and have noticed that there's this live ticker on your screen, this is the same exact feature as that. It's using the same API.
Okay.
And at all times, I have a live feed of my levels if I really need them right on my home screen. I find that I'm not overusing this feature, and I find it more helpful where, like, if I'm in a social situation, I can just slide out my phone and look real quick.
Oh, that's nice.
And not have to open up my whole phone, not have to go on my watch, open up an app, tap, whatever that may be. Yeah. And it's kind of my way of coping with the fact that I don't have it on my wrist anymore. I can quickly just slide it out of my pocket. So
yeah, that's good too, because also we do have to look at our phones so much more than non-diabetics just to see that. I feel like I'm afraid people think I'm texting while they're talking to me, which I just feel is rude, right? And
absolutely.
So I just want to see the number though. I do appreciate when the Libre alerts me if I've gone above or below range. I can see what the number is without having to actually open my phone. So just that notification window shows me the number. And if I just clear it and don't do anything, like without going into the app, it will beep again in 5 minutes, which is annoying. You have to go into the app to show it, like, all right, I heard you, But I appreciate seeing the number because it makes me, that also really helps my anxiety of like, oh, it's 161. With a side arrow. I don't really care about that, and I'm about to walk my dog, so I'm not going to do anything about that. My mindset has changed, and it's just different.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've talked about is really important and not really spoken about a lot, at least from these companies, right? These companies want you looking at it all the time and wanting the technology, but there's also it's important to face what this information means and how to navigate it. And I'm so glad that you came on the show today to kind of talk to me about your experience and my experience navigating this, because it's definitely different. So I hope that all the different types of people listening kind of were able to get something different from both of us.
Yeah, it's funny how different our experience is. And I don't wear a watch, and I won't, because that's just more tech on my body, even if it's not invasive. Thank you for taking time to dig into this.
Of course, thank you for coming on the show. If anyone has questions or wants to share their own experience with alert fatigue, the anxieties of this information, please let us know in the comments. Ginger, you have a YouTube channel. You'll also monitor the comments too, in case if you have questions for Ginger, she can respond questions for me, or also just to, continue this conversation, because it's something that we're all kind of navigating, and there could be other features that, that we don't really know about that, we'd love to hear about and love for everyone else to hear about. And then Ginger, you have an announcement, don't you?
Yes. So one thing that comes with CGMs is arrows anxiety, right? And you see 2 down arrows, you freak out, you eat half the kitchen. I have been working on not overeating during lows. Many years ago, I established new habits to help myself not overeat during lows. And I recently put that into a book. It's 100 pages. Stop Overeating During Low Blood Sugars with Diabetes. Find it on Amazon.
We'll put a link for that down in the description. Ginger, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
One thing I didn't bring up in this episode was my experience when I went to Coachella for the first time after being diagnosed with type 1, and while having Dexcom G6 on and an Apple Watch. I found that my first day back at this festival, first time having diabetes and having access to my glucose levels on my watch, I was really anxious, and getting ahead of myself, treating for lows that I thought were going to happen or highs that were going to happen, and it got me into trouble. And on day 2, I remember telling myself, Justin, only listen to the alerts. And I did that, and I felt so much more free. And I've taken that lesson into my everyday life, and I try my best to use the information that I have from my CGM and learn from it, but to not overanalyze it, to not get stuck into it. And I hope that you've taken something from this episode, whether it be that or something Ginger has done to help you on your journey. Let us know in the comments your anxieties, your experiences with CGM, the pros, but also the cons and the mental stuff that can come up. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to start that conversation. And maybe Ginger and I will do an Instagram live. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. New episodes of this podcast release every Monday on podcast platforms and on YouTube. So follow where you prefer and give the show a rating. That would be awesome. I'm Justin, and I'll see you next week.